So this morning I want to talk to you about the parable of the two servants and how it relates to the church and the Jews. Now my focus today is going to be on the Catholic Church, as I spent the past week focusing on the Protestant Church. So the first thing I'm going to do is show you what King James Version did to names. It says, then Peter. Is his name Peter? No, it's not. Yochanan. 1. But now I've got to address the name Jesus. As I have shown you many times in Luke 1, on his birth certificate is not Jesus, but it is Yehoshua. As I pointed out many times, Paul, when he was speaking to the Greeks on Mars Hill, said that the name of the one which they ignorantly serve, they had no name for. Okay? So his name is not Jesus, but Yehoshua to start with, and then and he brought him to Yehoshua. And when Yehoshua beheld him, he said, you are Shimon, son of Yonah. Well, he called him Shimon bar Yonah because he was speaking Aramaic. Aramaic, a sister language to Judean Hebrew. This was Aramean Judean that he was speaking. Aramean is Hebrew, just like Israeli Hebrew is Hebrew. You shall be called what? Cephas. Cephas. Or Kephas. But is it just a rock or a stone? No, it is not. You see, that's the difference between Peter and Kephas. Okay? So Kephas in the Semitic. The Kephas refers to a small green stone used for revelation. Big difference. Okay? I want to point something else out to you. That even in your culture and in the Spanish culture, misnaming is offensive and insulting. I'll give you an example. I remember working at a place that I was employed at a part-time job there, where people came to do community service. And there was a short Spanish fellow. His name was Armando. How do I know that that's what his name was? Because when people called him Herman, which means the same thing, he would yell out, "My name is Armando!" Now, if you get insulted by misnaming, how greater of an offense to the disciples and Yehoshua himself to be insulted by misnaming. Let me continue. He said unto him, Master, how often shall my brother sin against me, and I forgive him? until 7 times? Not Jesus. Yehoshua said unto him, I say not unto you until 7 times, but until 7 times 70. So he gives a parable. And today I'm going to show you how this parable is very similar to the Jews and the Christians. I will use the Catholic Church as an example today. Therefore the kingdom of heaven is likened unto a certain king, which had taken to account of his servants. And when he had begun to reckon, one was brought unto him, which owed him 10,000 talents. But forasmuch as he had not to pay his master, commanded him to be sold, and his wife and his children, all that he had, and payment to be made. And the servant therefore fell down and worshipped, and saying, Master, have patience with me, I will pay you all. And when the master of that servant was moved with compassion, and loosed him, and forgave him the debt, the same servant went out, and found one of his fellow servants, which owed him $1. $1. 100 pennies. 10,000 talents. That's a lot of money versus $1. And he laid hands on him and took him by the throat, saying, Pay me what you owe. And his fellow servant fell down at his feet and besought him, saying, Have patience with me, for I will pay all. And he would not, but he went and cast him into prison until he should pay his debt. So when his fellow servants, what are fellow servants? They are the messengers, or what you Christians call the angels. Even when Daniel fell on his face before Gabriel told him to stand up. Do not do this. I am of your fellow servants. When his fellow servants saw what was done, they were very sorry. And they came and told their master all that was done. And when his master, after he had called him, said unto him, You wicked servant, I forgave you all that debt, because you asked me. Should you not have also had compassion upon your fellow servant, even as I had pity on you? And his master was wroth, and delivered him to the tormentors, till he should pay all that was due to him. So likewise shall my heavenly Abba do also unto you, if you from your hearts forgive not every one his brother their trespasses. Now that we have context, let's go. This is the Jewish Virtual Library, and they're being very kind to the Catholic Church. But I will read most of it for you today. While a Catholic, i.e. universal church, came into being only at the Council of Nicaea in 325, a unified interpretation of the new religion of Christianity had begun to emerge during the 3 preceding centuries, and concomitantly the foundation of a church attitude toward the Jews. Mind you, they did not get that attitude from Paul, because if they would have bothered to read Romans 11, they would have not come anywhere near the offensiveness that the church morphed itself into. The early church fathers. Now remember, folks, you shall call no one father but your Father in heaven, or you shall call no one Abba but your Abba in heaven. Maybe I should go there. Call no man your father. See, right there. Call no man your father on earth, for you have but one Father. Matityahu 23 and verse 9. Did the church listen to Yehoshua? Absolutely not. The early church fathers, eager to complete the break with the synagogue, a Greek word, not a Hebrew word, urged the substitution of Sunday for the Jewish Sabbath and the abandonment of Passover, commemorating of the Exodus, for Easter, and Easter does not commemorate the crucifixion at all. Retaining the Bible while denying the people that was its subject, the church, declared itself the new Israel. And at that particular point in time, when they did this, when they declared themselves the new Israel, they became, listen to me carefully, folks. We will go to Revelation 3. They became the synagogue of Satan when they declared themselves replacement of Israel. They say that they are Jews, but they are not, and they do lie. Those were the people who are the synagogue of Satan. The Jews are not the synagogue of Satan. I don't care what your preachers tell you. The church declared itself the new Israel, and you can see it on the EU flag to this day. But they are not. Because if they would have bothered to read Romans 11, they would have realized that the only way to salvation for the Gentiles is to be grafted in among the branches, being joint partakers of the olive tree. But you Christians, you refuse to read Romans 11, because Romans 11 destroys it undermines and destroys your entire false narrative of the church and the Jews. It claimed the patriarchs and the prophets for itself, that's right, and later pronounced Judaism an aberration from the divine will. That's not what Paul said in Romans 11 verse 25. Paul said, "For I would not, Roman brethren, that you should be ignorant of this mystery, lest you, the Romans, be wise in your own conceit, that partial blindness happened to Israel." So Judaism is only partly blind. Let me put it to you like this. You see, I'm partly blind. I can't see text without my glasses. All I see is blur. So I'm partly blind. But I can partly see. But you Christians, you went all the way with your lies and your false narratives against Israel, against the Jews. All warnings and rebukes contained in the Jewish scriptures were applied to the Jewish people. I guess they didn't want to apply it to themselves. Well, since they're not going to apply it to themselves, somebody greater than the church is going to apply it to the church. While all praise and promise were applied to the church, the council at Nicaea, Christianity was unified under the Roman emperor, whose favorite theologian at any given time set the standard for orthodoxy. Others were declared heretics and suffered worse persecution than did the Jews. Then they went and set out to murder each other. What did Yehoshua say? By their fruits you shall know them. You cannot grow figs from a thorn tree. And when they set out to massacre themselves and murder the Jews, what are they except thorns, briars, and thistles? Nobody gave them authority to do that. How is it that the church heaps all praise and promise to themselves? Didn't Paul say, if you think you stand, take heed lest you fall? At the Council of Nicaea, Christians were unified under the Roman emperor, whose favorite theologian at any given time set the standard for orthodoxy. The others were declared heretics and suffered worse persecution than did the Jews. Church and therefore imperial policy to eliminate Judaism as a rival remain unchanged, except during the 2.5 years under Julian the Apostate. This was in 361 to 363. Under church influence, the emperors forbade the conversion of pagans to Judaism. Slave ownership by Jews was made difficult and was completely outlawed if the slave were a Christian. But Christians could enslave anybody they wanted to. Boy, that's a bunch of hypocrisy, isn't it? So, as I point out, what we have here is we have the parable of the two servants. One owed but $1, and the other one owed 10,000 talents. One servant was partly blinded, while the other was full of darkness. And as just in case you forgot, the one who was partly blinded was Israel, as written in Romans 11, verse 25. Where am I? Oh, right here. Okay. Despite pronouncements of official protection, synagogues were frequently attacked and destroyed. On the other hand, the emperors pursued traditional Roman policy of protecting Jewish life and undisturbed practice of Judaism. So, the people, even when an emperor decided they wanted to protect Jews, the people were having none of it. The Christian lay members were having none of it. And why is that? Because of what they were taught at church. The attitudes expressed in the theological literature at the time were ultimately even more important. Eusebius of Caesarea took every opportunity to stress God's rejection of the Jewish people. John Chrysostom hurled bitter invectives at the Jews and denounced Christians who associated with them. and visiting synagogues. Jerome delighted in emphasizing the false and real or imagined of ancient and contemporary Jews. Most important was Augustine, Bishop of Hippo of North Africa. He put forth the theory which long remained part of Christian theology, that it was the will of God, as he says, because the name of Jehovah is not God, I don't care how hard you try, to keep a remnant of the Jews alive in a degraded state as a living witness of the Christian church. Now, the early Middle Ages. In western part of the empire, the number of Jews was then comparatively small. Moreover, the Goths, now the real masters of the West, the Goths are Germanic peoples, and of Gog and Magog, by the way, were Arian Christians and therefore not under the influence of the Roman Church. Although some of the Goths later created their own Holy Roman Empire. You can look into that. Theodoric the Great, at 520, while expressing the usual Christian view that Judaism was a deviation from the truth, granted that faith could not be forced. Fake Pope Gregory I applied the same policy. In theory, this remained the basic papal policy for many centuries, although in practice it was often flagrantly violated. In a series of church councils meetings in Toledo throughout the 7th century, the Visigothic kingdom of Spain, which had by this time become Catholic, passed a series of increasingly stringent laws to compel the Jews to join the church or leave the country. Now, I'm going to make mention of this. It was my mother pointed out to me this in the past of my own ancestors. And the other, what do they call that? In the Great Inquisition. Only the Muslim conquest made it possible for the Jews to return their homes and their faith. What that means is the Muslims were kinder to the Jews than the Christians. Ouch. In the Eastern Empire, that would be the Russian half, what the Russian people are of the Eastern Orthodox, and church and state continued to be closely bound together under the emperors Heraclius and Leo III. Jews were forced into baptism. It may have been the examples of Spain and the Eastern Empire that led King Dagobert of the Franks to expel the Jews from his kingdom in 633, but the order was only briefly enforced. Before long, the kings and the nobles, especially Charlemagne and his sons, found the Jews very useful, although several church councils in France and Italy continued to object to friendly relations between Christians and Jews, and some important churchmen, like Bishops Agobard Amulo of Lyons, and agitated against them. The weakening of Pope Gregory I's policy was exemplified when Pope Leo VII, 937, advised the Archbishop of Mainz to expel the Jews from his diocese if they continued to refuse baptism. On the other hand, in 1036, Alexander II commended the French and the Spanish clergy for protecting Jews against physical attacks. His successor, Gregory VII, didn't I just read Gregory VII? No, it was something else. In 1081, however, objected to the employment of Jews in public office in the rising Christians kingdoms of the Iberian Peninsula. One may conclude, as the church in the West grew stronger, its policy grew more hostile. but the economic position of the Jews continued to work in their favor. Now, the later Middle Ages, we're talking the Crusaders era. During the crusading era, the situation of the Jews underwent radical changes. When the first Crusaders, unorganized peasants and city rabble, reached the Rhineland, they were already convinced that killing a Jew nearby was as meritorious as killing a Muslim in distant Palestine, and much less dangerous. Here and there, a local bishop tried to protect the Jews, but with little effect. Pope Urban II, who had started the crusading movement, did not rebuke the rioters. Clement III, an anti-pope, protested the return of Judaism of those who had yielded to baptism when in danger of their lives. The experience proved to the Jews that their position in Christian society was a precarious one. They asked for and received a promise of protection from the Holy Roman Emperor. It's not affiliated with the original Roman Empire. This was the Gothic kingdom that created their own Holy Roman Empire, but if they call themselves Roman, then that's what they are, Romans. 1103, and they sought a statement from the Pope. The first issued by the Pope, Calixtus II, was evidently meant as an answer to this appeal. The effect of the bull of protection is naturally hard to evaluate. Well, if it's hard to evaluate, then it's full of bullshit. It did not stop the threats to various Jewish communities in Central Europe when the Second Crusade got underway in 1144. The worst effects of the Third Crusade were felt in England, and that's a whole nother subject, and I did that topic a couple of years ago, where the King Edward clan stole, pillaged all the Jews' money and threw them out of England. Driven out of commerce during the 12th century by the rise of the middle class in the towns, the Jews turned to money lending because they were not allowed to farm, they were not allowed to trade. Just as Revelation 13 said that those who had the mark of the beast would force those who didn't have the mark of the beast to do. Especially since the church prohibited the taking of interest by Christians, churchmen high and low now joined the popular outcry against the Jews as extortioners ruining the Christian population. Well, the Christians didn't have to take out loans. It's kind of like Christians today. They take out exorbitant loans for their houses, like the average monthly payment in the United States for a house is $2,000 a month. Okay? And the average car payment, as I understand, because I'm not making car payments, I haven't made car payments since the early 2000s. Is now $600 to $1,000 a month. And you Christians, while trying to live this lavish lifestyle in debt, out of the other side of your mouth you accuse the Jews of being the world's bankers. You can't have it both ways. I don't borrow money. I don't have a house payment. I don't have a car payment. I live on what I can afford. Now, of course, you can't get a woman that way, and that's fine by me. I don't need a woman. This hostility thus resulted in the invention of charges which plagued the Jews for many centuries, the blood libel. And it comes from this blood libel that's speaking of right here is a result of you Christians borrowing money that you can't pay back. Whether you have difficulty paying back. You borrow too much money because you want to live an exorbitant lifestyle. First appeared in the 12th century and that of the desecration of the host in the 13th. A number of popes then and later denied these accusations, but they continued to crop up in various localities, resulting in the torture and killing of many Jews, since the local clergy were rarely restrained by the expressions of papal doubt. Your clergy taught you Christians to be evil. You've got no one to blame but yourself and your clergy. Contact between Christians and Jews being considered dangerous, Pope Guilty III, 1215, imposed upon all Jews the obligation of wearing distinguishable garments. That's right. There is my distinguishable garment right here. And this soon developed into the Jewish badge. Now, why do I wear this? Why? This is, first of all, in honor of the Jews who suffered in the Holocaust, but also my ancestors who, the Catholics and the Lutherans, accused of being Jews for their insistence upon keeping Shabbat. And since my ancestors were accused of being Jews, I gladly wear the title of Jude. That the unregulated presence of Jews endangered Christianity was accepted by the theologian Tom Aquinas, though his approach to the problem of Jews in Christian society was precise, logical, and relatively tolerant. Until the 13th century, though, the conversion of Jews was actively sought. The church's primary aim was defense of Christianity against the possible attractions of Judaism. From the 13th century, the church went over to the offensive. The primary aim now became the total conversion of the Jews. In theory, the use of force for this purpose was still prohibited, but once baptized, under whatever circumstances, a person could not revert without laying himself open to the charge of heresy, entailing relentless pursuit by the newly established Inquisition. Yes, that Inquisition was what my mother told me about. A conscious effort was now made to weaken Judaism and degrade it among its own adherents. One target was the Talmud and other rabbinic works. The charge was raised not only that the Talmud contained blasphemies against Christianity, but that its contexts were ridiculous and aimed to mislead the Jews. Each of these three important public disputations, Paris 1240, Barcelona 1263, and Tortosa 1413-14, resulted in the condemnation of the Talmud, repeated on several other occasions. An attempt to make listening to conversionist sermons compulsory was made briefly in Aragon after the Barcelona disputation. The Ecumenical Council of Vienna introduced the study of Hebrew and Arabic into the universities so as to prepare for more effective disputation with the Jews and the Muslims. Hostile preaching led to anti-Jewish riots on more than one occasion, but especially in Castile and Aragon. In 1391, a number of Jewish communities were destroyed, and foundations for Marianism In Spain, see Marinos. All right. An old Spanish term meaning swine, used to execrate medieval Spanish Jews who converted to Christianity but secretly kept their Judaism. You see what I'm saying? The historical period came to an end with the expulsion of the Jews from Spain in 1492 and from Portugal in 1496 to 97. In their desire to unify their state, the Catholic monarchs Ferdinand and Isabella made religion the supreme test of the political loyalty. Their goal was frankly conversionary, and reorganized Inquisition was closely allied to the royal power. In Castile and Aragon, a choice was offered between baptism and exile. In Portugal, conversion was achieved by naked compulsion. Okay? So, I'm going to stop right there. So, the foundation for what is Christianity today is the parable of the unforgiving servant. But I'm going to go further than that, because I'm going to call out modern Christianity, not just the Catholic Church, all Christianity, for their participation in doctrine that makes the Jews evil in their eyes. That means everything from the Catholic Church, the Protestants, the Baptists, all the way down to the Quakers and the Anabaptists themselves. And the reason why I mention Anabaptists, because you see, Anabaptists were at one time Shabbat keepers. And they communed with the Jews, while the other Christians regaled the Jews. So much so that the churches, the four main churches, started persecuting the Anabaptists, labeling them as Jews. Killing everyone that they could find. Now, the ones who were left began to keep Sunday and adopting all the old fables of their enemies in the church among the Protestants and the Catholics. To the point, listen carefully, that in Germany and or in Europe, many of the Mennonites sided with Hitler. That's right. There is proof. You can look it up and you can find it. So we're going to go to Revelation 18, I do believe, maybe 17. I will go here first. And there came unto me one of the seven messengers which had seven vials, and talked with me, saying, Come here, and I will show unto you the judgment of the great whore that sits upon many waters, Now, the great whore is that great city, Rome, with whom the kings of the earth had committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth had made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast. Now, full of names of blasphemy. What are these names of blasphemy? The names of blasphemy are replacement names for Jehovah and Yehoshua. I'll give you an example. Deus, Dios, God, God, Jesus, Jesus. Those are the names of blasphemy. Having 7 heads and 10 horns, and the 7 heads, the word was the Claudio Julius dynasty, however you say it, and the 10 horns was the horns of Europe. And of course, the 11th horn grew up in Rome after the 10 horns, and that would be Mr. Vatican himself. And the woman was arrayed in purple. This is still the city, Rome. And scarlet color and decked with gold, and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand. Now, I want to warn you that it was the Christians who made up this particular graven image. And Synagogue. You can see various forms of it. You have this one. There was one, I did find one picture one time where the cup that she had in her hand was actually golden in color. Okay, but we'll go and look at this particular picture right here. Here we go. This is the golden cup right here. This is the crown on her head. That's ecclesia. This is what is on, or what was on, and I guess presumably they put it back on their main cathedral in Paris, France. And this is Synagogue. They made this, they created this graven image, and they put it on I can't remember what they call that place in France. And here's another picture. You can see it right here. She has a golden cup in her hand. Right here, golden cup in her hand. I don't know if this is going to show me something better. Nope. This one will probably do it. Or is it? I don't even know what that is right there. But this, she has a golden cup in her hand, as you can see right here, and a crown on her head. And Synagogue is blindfolded. This is what you Christians call the church now. You remember Yehoshua said, you're going to be judged by your own words. So the church has now declared herself the great whore of Babylon. Right here. The woman was arrayed in purple. There she is, arrayed in those days, purple and blue was called the same color. Okay? Which was royal. Arrayed in purple and scarlet color and decked with gold. So does she have oh yeah, they got scarlet on. Yes, they do. They've got purple and scarlet right there, just like you see. And decked with gold and precious stones and pearls. All right. Do we have decked with gold, precious stones, and, well, she's got a golden crown on her head, right? I can't, make it out any more than that. Having a golden cup in her hand. All right? Bingo, there's a golden cup in her hand. Full of abominations, filthiness of her fornication. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots, the abomination of the earth. And I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the, not the saints, the Kodesh. And the martyrs of not Jesus, but Yehoshua. Now, the blood of the Kodesh, and the blood of the martyrs of Yehoshua and the Kodesh are two different people. The Kodesh are the Jews. And the blood of the martyrs of Yehoshua, these are the true followers of Yehoshua whom they murdered after the Council of Nicaea. That's you, the church, after the Council of Nicaea. You, with your graven image of ecclesia and synagogue, you have declared yourself the great whore, O church. And because you have, you are going to receive the punishment of the great whore along with Rome. Okay? So, Revelation 18 verse 1, and after these things I saw another messenger come down from the sky, having great power, and the earth was lit by his glory. And he cried aloud mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, has become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and the cage of every unclean and hateful bird. For all the Gentiles have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. And I heard another voice in the sky saying, Come out of her, my people. Well, since the church declared itself the great whore, the church then could not possibly be his people. So by default then, his people are the 12 tribes of Israel, and the Rahabs and the Ruths, meaning the Gentiles that cleave to the people of Israel. And be not partakers of her sins, that you receive not of her plagues, for her sins have reached unto the sky, and Jehovah has remembered her iniquities. Reward her as she rewarded you. Do to her as she did to you. Who is you? Well, we can read right here how she rewarded somebody. Do unto her like she did to the Jews. Burn down her houses, take her gold, and leave her to die. That is the edict that Jehovah is putting down on this great whore. And the church calls itself the great whore, so it's going to be treated just like Rome, the great whore. And double unto her. Give to her double, according to her works, in the cup that she filled. In that cup which she filled, give to her double. How much she glorified herself and lived deliciously. So much torment and sorrow give to her, for she says in her heart, I sit as a queen. Yes, she did. She's got that crown on her head like she's a queen. And shall see no sorrow. Therefore shall her plagues come in one day, death, mourning, and famine, and she shall be utterly burned with fire, for strong is Jehovah Elohim, who judges her. Church, judgment is waiting for you. I hope you're ready for it.